Hi, this is Steve with Thresher Media Group. Welcome to When You're Ready to Listen. This podcast is dedicated to exploring the truth about God, things you may not have understood, may not have been taught, or quite frankly, had a very hard time believing. And since our entire relationship with God rests on believing, it is important we learn how to separate the truth from the many lies and fictions that abound within the religion of Christianity. So when you're ready to listen, tune in and discover a pathway to freedom, encouragement, life, and hope. Couple of quick reminders. Thresher Media Group is a 501c3 public charity, and we rely entirely on donations from our listeners. If the Spirit leads you, please support this ministry. It's easy to do. Just go to the website, threshermediagroup.com, and click the Donate tab in the header. I also encourage you to go to Amazon and pick up a copy of Liberating the Book of Revelation, Returning to the Source of the Message. This book is intended to help us all know what the Spirit said and how He said it. The book is focused not on interpreting the book of Revelation, that is what this podcast is for, but on accurately representing the book of Revelation in the manner in which the Spirit originally spoke it to John. It is available in all formats, hardback, paperback, ebook format, and as an audible. In our last podcast, we discussed the reason for the harlot's judgment, the arrogance of Semiramis, and we dove into the nature of her judgment, death, mourning, and famine. But then we started to examine the implications of all that we have learned about the harlot and what it means in terms of our understanding of Christianity, at least the way it has been operated by those who are drunk with her wine and captive in her great city. Let's continue with an explanation, or an examination, I should say, of worship, the design point, and wisdom, the contrasting influence. Episode 152, Revelation 18, Implications Continued. Worship does not equal relationship. There is another aspect of the harlot's delusion that we should address before we move on, and that is the issue of worship. God created us to worship, more specifically, to worship Him. The worship of Yahweh is a beautiful gift, the experience of which is glorious, powerful, and joyful. It is a stabilizing factor in our lives which can help us get through any difficulty we may face. When we drink the harlot's wine, we may be drunk and our discernment numbed, but we still love to worship. The harlot's delusion comes when we believe that our love for worship proves that we love Jesus and that we know Him, or that He knows us. After all, even the harlot and those unclean spirits, birds, and beasts who watch over the people of God love it when we worship. They even require it. Psalm 137, verses 1 through 6. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down and wept when we remembered Zion. Upon the willows in the midst of it, we hung our harps. For there our captors demanded of us songs, and our tormentors mirth, saying, "Sing us one of the songs of Zion." How can we sing Yahweh's song in a foreign land? If I forget you, O Jerusalem, may my right hand forget her skill. May my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth if I do not remember you, if I do not exalt Jerusalem above my chief joy. According to the Codex, Zion refers to the historical city of Jerusalem, but oh, so much more. Zion is code, and it serves as a symbol or a metaphor, a deeper picture of spiritual significance, as Zion provides a picture of the people of God, the true city in which Yahweh dwells. This is pictured for us in Hebrews 12:22 and Revelation 14:1 through 3. Hebrews 12:22 through 24. But you have come to Mount Zion and to the city of the now living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to myriads of angels, to the general assembly and church of the firstborn who have been caused to being enrolled in heaven, and to God, the judge of all, and to the spirits of the righteous caused to have been made perfect, and to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood, which now is speaking better than the blood of Abel. And Revelation 14:1 through 3. Then I looked, and behold, the Lamb had been standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, now having his name and the name of his Father, caused to have been writing on their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven, like the sound of many waters, and like the sound of loud thunder. And the voice which I heard was like the sound of harpists now playing on their lyres, or their harps. And they now sing a new song before the throne and before the four living creatures and the elders. And no one could be caused to learn the song except the 144,000 who were caused to have been being purchased from the earth. It is a glorious experience to worship God, and it is likely that there is a part of these angelic beings that miss the beauty and power of worshiping in the presence of God. Therefore, these captors and tormentors, the unclean spirits, birds, and beasts who have been caused to be hating, demand worship. They want the people of God to sing them songs of Zion, songs from the heavenly Jerusalem where Yahweh and the true people of God dwell. What does this mean? It means that the worship of God does not by definition equal relationship with God. For many, like all those in Babylon, it just equates to experience with God. Jesus once asked a very peculiar question. He had been talking about how God will bring justice to his elect, to those who cry out to him day and night, and he said that the Father will not delay long over them. But then he asked a bizarre question. Besides, at the coming of the Son of Man, will he, in the future, find faith on the earth? The implication is that when Jesus returns, those with faith will be few and far between. I mean, this is staggering and perhaps anti-Christian to even consider, given that a third of the population identifies as Christians. It's a good thing that it was Jesus who said it. With just a quick perusal on the internet, one can find recordings of worship conferences where thousands upon thousands are worshiping the Lord. The scene is powerful and moving, and there are these types of conferences happening all over the world. It's easy to think, wow, Lord, look at all this faith. There are so many who genuinely believe. Or is there? Let us consider the worship environment when Jesus came to Israel, to his own people. At that point in time, Israel had done something that it had rarely done throughout its entire history. The people had relinquished all their idols and became monotheistic. This was a big change because their history is replete with polytheistic worship. But now there were no more high places. They no longer worship Baal, Ashtoreth, Asherah, Chemosh, Dagon, Moloch, Milcom, Tammuz, Sikut, Kiun, and the sundry other so-called gods, demons really, that Israel had worshipped in years past. They had become a monotheistic country and worshipers of Yahweh, the Lord, Adonai. This was the result or product of God having exiled them to Babylon for their polytheistic and adulterous ways. As such, they celebrated all the required festivals and honored the high days. In fact, it is recorded by Josephus, a Roman historian, that based on the number of animal sacrifices, upwards of 2,700,000 people descended upon Jerusalem on Passover. They all came to worship God. They came with their sacrifices. They went to the services, and they sang, they praised, they worshiped, and they held to all the prescribed means by which the law said God was to be worshiped. Their celebrations tower over our worship conferences. Can you imagine a gathering that big? I'm sure the entire experience would have been overwhelming and more than impressive. The temple, the priests, the crowds, the smoke from the burning flesh on the altar of sacrifice, the wonderful meals, the trumpets, the songs, the readings, and so on. These people worshiped Yahweh. If we were there, we would have thought that Israel was a holy nation set apart for God and that all these people loved Yahweh. But did they? Really? What was Jesus' perspective? And keep in mind, Jesus always had a heavenly perspective, and his sight was never limited by the veil of the physical. The Father always showed him what he needed to see and always gave him understanding of what he needed to know. In fact, Jesus said that his judgment was true because he did nothing on his own initiative, but only that which the Father prescribed. Moreover, he never sought his own will, but only the will of the Father. Accordingly, he said his judgment is true because he is not alone in it, but the Father is with him in judgment. Matthew 23, verse 37 through 39. Jerusalem, 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 who is now killing the prophets and stones those who were caused of being sent to her. How often I wanted to gather you children together, the way a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you would not. Behold, your house is now caused to be left to you desolate. Wow, this is unbelievable. This is shocking. Despite all the religious fervor and worship, Jesus saw through it all to the hearts of all these worshipers. To him, they were apostate believers who were unwilling to let him gather them into his fold, but they would not be gathered. Keep in mind, when it was all said and done, at most a handful of people were willing to stand with Jesus in the face of death. Millions came to worship God at Passover, and only a few were willing to stand with the Son of God. At his crucifixion, there were merely a handful, mostly women and John. The rest who had not already left him simply ran away. And even when those who fled returned, there were only about 120 people who were willing to gather in his name. The worship of God does not equal relationship with God. We simply must understand and accept the fact that the worship of God does not equal relationship with God. No matter the size of the gathering, the fervor, the intensity, or the talent, it does not mean that a single person who cries out, "Lord, Lord," even knows Yahweh by his name. When it was all said and done, the Israelites were unwilling. They did not want to be gathered by him, and they did not want to be hidden under the safety of his wing. They wanted what they wanted and not what he wanted. They wanted God to do things their way according to their wisdom for their lives. Hence, they were not willing to submit to his way and his wisdom for their lives. They did not like the pathways he had carved out for them to walk, and their fear of losing control, became their master. Oh, sure, they loved the experiences they had worshiping God, the celebrations, the music, the joy of the event, but they did not really love God, for they were not willing to lay down their lives to honor him and receive his life. Matthew 10:38-39. And he who does not now take his cross and now follow after me is now not worthy of me. He who has been finding his life will in the future lose it. And he who has been losing his life for my sake will in the future find it. Luke 14:26-28. If anyone chooses to now come to me and does not now hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot now be caused to be my disciple. Whoever does not now carry his own cross and choose to now come after me, now cannot be caused to now be my disciple. Matthew 16:24-28. Then Jesus said to his disciples, if anyone wishes to come after me, he is commanded to choose to deny himself, and commanded to take up his cross, and commanded to now follow me. Truly, I now say to you, there are some of those who have been standing here who may not choose to taste death until they may see the Son of Man choose to now be coming in his kingdom. To be a true disciple of Jesus, to be a true follower, there's a requirement that one be willing to die in order that they may live. Those who are unwilling to die to, or more accurately, to let God put to death their flesh, their old sinful nature, are simply not worthy of Jesus. And do not dismiss the imagery of carrying one's own cross, for it speaks of a brutal, cruel, and prolonged form of death. That is why, of the many followers within Christianity, some simply may not taste death until it is too late. Despite all the religious theatrics within the household of God, including great acts of worship, few are willing to walk down this path of tribulation and trouble so that they might find life, the one who is life. Faith is the issue. We learned in the angel's rebuke of John, who was wowed by the harlot, that the beauty and sensuality of the harlot is not just an institutional issue, but an individual one. We must not be mesmerized by those leaders who are amazing people with amazing talents. We must not be captured by great acts of worship, for there's a good chance that the people of God are not just in love with this harlot, but are doing her bidding. We must be wise and remember that Jesus said, besides, at the coming of the Son of Man, will he, in the future, find faith on the earth. He did not ask, will he find all manner of religious activity, even praise and worship? No, will he in the future find faith? Faith is the issue. This is the question we need to ask about ourselves. We may have plenty of leaves, but do we have the fruit of agape love? Do we have the evidence that proves that we have chosen to live as bondservants of Christ? Isaiah 58, verses 1-5. Shout with the voice of a trumpet. Shout aloud. Don't be timid. Tell my people Israel of their sins. Yet they act so pious. They come to the temple every day and seem delighted to learn all about me. They act like a righteous nation that would never abandon the laws of its God. They ask me to take action on their behalf, pretending they want to be near me. We have fasted before you, they say. Why aren't you impressed? We've been very hard on ourselves, and you don't even notice it. I'll tell you why I respond. It's because you are fasting to please yourselves. Even while you fast, you keep oppressing your workers. What good is fasting when you keep on fighting and quarreling? This kind of fasting will never get anywhere with me. You humble yourself by going through the motions of penance, bowing your head like reeds bending in the weed. You dress in burlap and cover yourself with ashes. Is this what you call fasting? Do you really think this will please Yahweh? God is not impressed by acts of worship, sacrifice, and service. They do not mean anything to him, no matter how sincere. Israel's worship of God did not flow from his life, nor from true love. Rather, their worship flowed from selfishness and wanting what they wanted from God in this world. They did these things to please themselves, to feel good, to feel close to God, to feel something, to feel anything real. And they hoped that through their obedience, they would find God's favor and blessing, both as a nation and individually. Therefore, God asks us to tell his people about their sin of unbelief and to speak the truth about their delusion. We're told to shout it out loud and not be timid. As believers, we've been somewhat reluctant to speak of such things because we would likely be castigated and berated for even having the audacity to think that all the worship, sacrifice, and service of so many sincere Christians was not actually of faith, but the acts of a big tree with lots of leaves, inspired by the love of this harlot. But this truth should be shouted aloud with the voice of a trumpet. Come out of her, my people. The design point. This whole dynamic of what takes place within the household of God is ridiculously hard to discern within ourselves, much less in others. After all, we've all been seduced by our own sincerity and our own desire to please God. And simply said, we have loved this woman, and we are easily persuaded by her looks and her moves. Besides, it's inexplicable how supernatural works done in Jesus' name, like miracle working, healing, and casting out demons, can be works of our flesh, the product of our own lust of the flesh. The well of delusion into which the people of God have fell is deep. Therefore, how can we escape her? How can we depart? How can we see through our own drunken delusion and passionate sensuality? Given that this woman and her unclean spirits, birds, and beasts all abide within the midst of Christianity, and since she is so seductive, attractive, and sensual, we must always focus on the design point. We got to die to live, and we must live to love. This must become our purpose, our desire, and our maniacal focus. Or said another way, blessed is the one who is now awake and now keeping his clothes. Design. We must be willing to let Jesus go to war against anything within us that does not want him to be the I am, the Lord, over every aspect of our lives. We must be willing to let him put our flesh to death so that he can take up his residence and exercise what can otherwise be described as despotic rule within our being. He will not force himself upon us, as we must be willing. We must invite him to go to war against everything within us that stands in opposition to his full and complete possession of our being. We must allow the complete dispossession of all that we are for all that he is. This is the ultimate exchange, our life for his life. Think of it as a beautiful exchange of our insecurity, fear, pride, anxiety, hopelessness, and all manner of coping mechanisms and so on, for his stability, security, rest, peace, fruitfulness, love, and endurance, even during great difficulty. It's an amazing exchange that can only happen by faith, by letting Yahweh be our trust. Jesus only goes where we let him. He knocks, but we must open the door. So this must become an issue of relational trust, whereby we become fully convinced that he is love and that he loves us and always has our best interests in mind, no matter what he must take us through. And even though the pathway to life is death, it's all about faith. To survive the journey of death that leads to life, we must be willing to reject all that we believe is true, which has been passed on to us by the harlot, her demonic hordes, and by the king of this world, who we know is nothing but a liar. We must be willing to forego all the weak and worthless elemental things of this world comprised of religious rules that enslave us. Do not taste, do not touch, and so on. We must practically exchange the lies for the truth, for everything which the King of Kings and Lord of Lords has revealed about himself and about us. We must come to believe his name, Yahweh. The point. As the Father lived in Jesus and did his work through Jesus, so too Jesus must live in his people in order that he might do his works through them. And as a consequence, they will love with his agape love, as he alone is agape. Faith expressing itself in agape love is the only work that matters. It is the only proof that a person does not abide in the harlot's embrace. And it is to the extent that we let him put our old sinful nature, our flesh, to death. That is the extent to which he will live in us and do his work through us. Remember, he never forces his way. He simply knocks. Our lust of the flesh, our desire to be like God and to have God appreciate and accept all that we do for him, and all the deeds that flow from our flesh are relationship killers. The lust of our flesh keeps us trusting in what we can do and not trusting what he must do. Therefore, it must be killed by a willing sacrifice. For our relationship with God must be based on trust, on faith. For without faith, it is impossible to please God. Faith expressing itself in his agape love is the only work that matters. Technically, we do not love, but he loves in and through us as agape love comes with him. It is the character and nature of his personhood. A person who has not walked the pathway of death and does not bear the scars is likely still making love to the harlot and still exalting in her glory. The only way to come out of her is to be willing to let Jesus put our flesh to death so that we may be alive and walk in the Spirit, doing only what our Father tells us to do and say, and going only where he tells us to go, when he tells us to do, say, and go. And this is what it means to be set free by Jesus so that we may, in the future, choose to live free. The immoral woman contrasted. Proverbs chapter 2, verses 16 through 22. Wisdom will save you from the immoral woman, from the seductive words of the promiscuous woman. She has abandoned her husband and ignores the covenant she made before God. Entering her house leads to death. It is the road to the grave. The man who visits her is doomed. He will never reach the paths of life. Follow the steps of good men instead and stay on the paths of the righteous. For only the godly will live in the land, and those with integrity will remain in it. But the wicked will be removed from the land, and the treacherous will be uprooted. Proverbs chapter 5, 1 through 14. My son, pay attention to my wisdom. Listen carefully to my wise counsel. Then you'll show discernment, and your lips will express what you've learned. For the lips of an immoral woman are as sweet as honey, and her mouth is smoother than oil. But in the end, she is as bitter as poison, as dangerous as a double-edged sword. Her feet go down to death. Her steps lead straight to the grave. For she cares nothing about the path to life. She staggers down a crooked trail and doesn't realize it. So now, my sons, listen to me. Never stray from what I am about to say. Stay away from her. Don't go near the door of her house. If you do, you will lose your honor and will lose to merciless people all you have achieved. Strangers will consume your wealth, and someone else will enjoy the fruit of your labor. In the end, you will groan in anguish when disease consumes your body. You will say, how I hated discipline. If only I had not ignored all the warnings. Oh, why didn't I listen to my teachers? Why didn't I pay attention to my instructors? I've come to the brink of utter ruin, and now I must face public disgrace. These passages present the reality of loving the immoral woman and participating in her pleasures. Those who continue will be personally afflicted, and everyone will see the shame of their nakedness, the public disgrace. There is no escape. Let us heed the words of Yahweh and flee from this corrupt city. We must not make excuses, compromises, or be afraid of making waves. Get out. Come out of her. This command is communicated to those in the household of God who have been captivated and held captive to the harlot. It does not sound very Christian, and rest assured, if you flee Babylon, others will make sure that you are not acting very loving. You may hurt some people by your decision, but you must answer to Yahweh and not to the religious system of Christianity. Jesus is the one who says, you are commanded, the people mine, to come out of her so that you may not participate of her sins and may not receive of her plagues. Besides, who knows? Maybe others will wake up to their drunken stupor that has clouded their hearts and likewise choose to flee Babylon. Instead of following this immoral woman, there is another woman that the Lord desires us to follow and to enjoy, and that is wisdom, who is also personified in the book of Proverbs as a woman. Proverbs chapter 1, verse 20 through 33. Wisdom shouts in the streets. She cries out in the public square. She calls to the crowds along the main street, to those gathered in front of the city gate. How long, you simpletons, will you insist on being simple-minded? How long will you mockers relish your mocking? How long will you fools hate knowledge? Come and listen to my counsel. I'll share my heart with you and make you wise. I called you so often, but you wouldn't come. I reached out to you, but you paid no attention. You ignored my advice and rejected the correction I offered. So I will laugh when you are in trouble. I will mock you when disaster overtakes you, when calamity overtakes you like a storm, when disaster engulfs you like a cyclone, and anguish and distress overwhelm you. When they cry for help, I will not answer. Though they anxiously search for me, they will not find me. For they hated knowledge and chose not to fear Yahweh. They rejected my advice and paid no attention when I corrected them. Therefore, they must eat the bitter fruit of living their own way, choking on their own schemes. For simpletons turn away from me to death. Fools are destroyed by their own complacency. But all who listen to me will live in peace, untroubled by fear of harm. Proverbs 4, verses 4 through 9. My father taught me, take my words to heart. Follow my commands, and you will live. Get wisdom, develop good judgment. Don't forget my words or turn away from them. Don't turn your back on wisdom, for she will protect you. Love her, and she will guard you. Getting wisdom is the wisest thing you can do. And whatever else you do, develop good judgment. If you prize wisdom, she will make you great. Embrace her, and she will honor you. She will place a lovely wreath on your head. She'll present you with a beautiful crown. The options are contrasted with such force that we must really be fools to ignore wisdom and to stay in our religious system, that great city of religious apostasy, Babylon the Great. It does not matter what others say or how they wrap up their complaint in Christian niceties. It is time to leave. Let's stop here, and in our next podcast, pick back up with Revelation chapter 18, verses 9 through 10, and the reaction to the harlot's judgment by the kings of the earth. I'm glad you tuned in and have been ready to listen. To get a free download of the full written transcript with all the scripture references footnoted, please go to threshermediagroup.com. That is THRESHER mediagroup.com. This is Steve with Thresher Media Group. When you're ready to listen, tune in.